Our next guest is one of Wall Street's most vocal Bitcoin bulls, recently meeting with members of the House Financial Services Committee to discuss what he calls his digital assets framework to help the U.S. become the global crypto leader. Joining us now in a CNBC exclusive is Strategy co-founder, executive chairman Michael Saylor. Strategy announcing this weekend it delivered a Bitcoin gain of $2.6 billion so far this year. Michael, it's paid to keep buying no matter what. My question is, how much are you involved? Because I know you've met with members of the Trump administration, cabinet, family members, I think the president himself. So are you involved in advising around this strategic crypto reserve?
I've met with a bunch of senators on the Democratic and the Republican side, a bunch of Congress people, a few members of cabinet, a few members of the administration, and anybody that wants to talk. You know me, for the last 4.5 years, I'm willing to talk about Bitcoin to anybody, anywhere in the world, every day.
Yes, and we appreciate that, talking to our audience about it. So were you surprised that in the announcement over the weekend, the president mentioned other smaller coins like XRP, Solana, and Cardano, as well as Bitcoin for the Strategic Crypto Fund?
I'm not surprised. I mean, I think there's no way to interpret this other than this is bullish for Bitcoin and is bullish for the entire U.S. crypto industry. You know, there are conservatives that view the right path forward is just a Bitcoin-only policy because Bitcoin is a commodity, an asset without an issuer, a neutral asset, and there's no controversy. But the president's adopted a more liberal economic policy, and that's his right. He's president of the United States.
Yeah, no, I'm sure you would have preferred it, though, if it was a Bitcoin-only fund.
You know, I believe that the best thing for the country is to move forward with an enlightened, progressive policy toward digital assets. I think it's worth $100 trillion to the United States, and ultimately there's 4 different assets that people need to come to grips with. A digital commodity like Bitcoin, an asset without an issuer, backed by digital power. A digital currency like a stable coin backed by a fiat currency equivalent. A digital security, an asset with an issuer backed by a stock or a bond so we can tokenize Wall Street. And then a digital token, which is an asset with an issuer that's backed by digital utility. I think everybody's trying to come to grips with that taxonomy, and as the market gets more educated, we're going to see more progressive, constructive policy engagement.
But as it relates to the crypto fund, I guess, one thing people are going to try to figure out, and what the White House is going to have to explain, is why we need that. I get that you think the price of Bitcoin is going up sharply, and you've definitely put your money where your mouth is, but it is still a speculative asset. So is it just about investment gains for the U.S. government, or is there another strategic reason, say like oil, we have that, where we would need this?
The key to keep in mind is that Bitcoin is not competing with the dollar. It's competing with international real estate, global equities, expensive money managers on Wall Street, and any long-range investment that somebody makes. And so right now we're about $2 trillion in Bitcoin. It's going to 20 trillion, then it's going to 200 trillion, then it's growing 20% a year. And that capital is coming from overseas. It's coming from China, from Russia, from Europe, from Africa, from Asia, from the 20th century to the 21st century. So what's compelling about it is if the United States takes a position in the emerging crypto economy, if it buys up 10, 20% of the Bitcoin network, we're going to pay off the national debt. And so why wouldn't that be in the interest of the United States?
I guess the question would be, we're dealing with instruments that historically, Michael, have had drawdowns of you name it. I mean, 20, 40, 50%. How much risk, or what would that do to sentiment if, in fact, that was a paper loss, even momentarily, for the government?
I don't think anybody's ever lost money in the Bitcoin network holding 4 years. The United States' best investments are Alaska, Mexico, California, and Louisiana, and Manhattan. We're still holding them hundreds of years later. It's a nation state. So presumably, you want to buy Bitcoin, you want to hold it for 100 years. You know where the future's going. The AIs, the foreigners, the Europeans, the 20th century capitalists, they're all going to cyberspace. And so the United States has the ability to buy this for a nickel and pay off the national debt. It'll be the greatest economic program of the 21st century for this country.
How do you think it gets funded?
I mean, I think that I'd leave that to the president's working group. They'll eventually decide what they want to do and the scale they want to do it. There are a dozen people on it, the head of the Treasury, the SEC, the CFTC, Commerce, the Attorney General. The president, I'm sure, will opine. Yeah. I'm sure you'll have leadership from Tim Scott and French Hill, both the Republicans and the Democrats. Everybody's going to have their opinions. It's above my pay grade to decide. But what I would say is this. We bought Manhattan for 60 guilders. It was a good trade. We bought Alaska for $6 million. It was a good trade. We paid $40 million for 75% of this country. It's a good trade. We can afford it. We should buy the future.
I mean, but what? And you've done this before. You've talked about this before. But comparing a cryptocurrency digital asset that is still considered highly speculative to American cities and states.
Well, Bitcoin's not highly speculative to the 500 million people in the crypto economy. It's the best performing asset in the past 15 years, and generally the best performing asset every single year. My company's gone from a $250 million investment to almost a $50 billion position in 48 months. So clearly, there's enormous economic energy in this asset. It is probably the most certain thing in the financial universe if you have a long time horizon.
I have another sort of, and this might be like a legal question, but as this becomes more adopted, and if we're talking about a strategic Bitcoin reserve or crypto reserve, how do you prevent insider trading, front running? You know, there's no insider trading laws because they're not securities. So Trump can just, tweet about X coin and someone can front run it.
The reason that there's so much support for a commodity like Bitcoin is it is an asset without an issuer. No entity controls it. No entity runs the network. No entity can change the protocol. No entity has enough power to impact the market trading of that protocol. That's actually why most of the focus is on the digital commodity. And that's what makes Bitcoin special. Satoshi was the insider. He left 1 million Bitcoin for all of humanity forever and walked away without ever benefiting. And that's what makes Bitcoin special.
Do you think that any other asset should be in the strategic crypto reserve?
You know, I think if you're looking out over the next 100 years, trying to figure out how do you capitalize a nation state or a country, what you want is a digital commodity. But if you have a sovereign wealth fund, then I think it's well within the rights of the leader of the nation to decide to put, proprietary assets, securities, tokens, and the like into it. And of course, the decision will eventually be made through a fairly comprehensive political process over the next 6 months. We have till July 22nd when the digital assets framework and recommendations from the executive order are due on the president's desk. It should be interesting to watch what happens between now and then.
Well, Michael, we certainly appreciate you coming on to talk us through how you're thinking about all this. As one of the biggest proponents, Michael Saylor from Strategy.